Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sports Speak. I'm your host, Jared Smith, and alongside me is...
Alexis Yoder.
So, a lot of things happened in this week's sports realm for Penn State. Let's get into it. Lex?
All right, so first we're going to start off with women's soccer, which stands at a record of 6-1-1. On Sunday afternoon, they had a rematch of last season's Big Ten championship game with Michigan, which ended in a blowout win for Penn State on Sunday. And after starting the season out 0-1 with a loss to Rutgers, the Nittany Lions haven't lost since, and really they're on their way to possibly repeat as Big Ten champions.
That's exciting to hear for Penn State fans, I bet.
And then let's move on to men's soccer. They currently stand with a 4-1 record. They're coming off of a 1-0 overtime win on the road against Northwestern. And after a string of positive COVID tests caused the team to cancel 2 of their last games, they seem like they're getting back on the winning path.
You know, that's good to hear for them, especially since even in professional sports, you hear people getting COVID. They're taking so much time to get better and actually back to what they do. So I'm glad that these players are able to come around quicker and just, produce and put stats out there for people to see.
Definitely. And it was a very slow offensive game for the Nittany Lions against Northwestern. They had a couple really good chances to score in regulation, but they just couldn't get the job done. Maybe that was just them needing to get back into the swing of things against quality teams, because let's be honest, the Big Ten is so strong in so many different sports that no game is really a throwaway game. There's no really weak team in the Big Ten. So the fact that they were able to grind out this win after a couple weeks and days off is good for them, and that shows some positivity.
I really like the way they were moving the ball, At sometimes you would wish that they put a little bit more pace behind the ball, but at the end of the day, they got the job done, and that's all you can ask.
That's all you can ask for. All right, let's move on to field hockey. They have a record of 4-3. They completed a weekend sweep of Michigan State to get above 500. And I just want to note their head coach, Charmaret Curtis. I had a couple opportunities to talk with her in the fall when obviously no sports were going on. And she's just an amazing leader for this team. She's been through so much in her tenure as a coach here, which is pretty much, I want to say, over 20 years, maybe approaching 30. And she was a field hockey athlete here at Penn State in her time. And she's just been a trailblazer for women's sports in her time as an athlete and now as a coach. And she really advocates bringing that to her team off the field, because these players are so much more than just athletes. They're student athletes, they're people, and it's important to honor their voices.
That's a really good thing to note, Players have power, and we see that at the professional level, but also players have power at any level. So as long as we keep letting players, kind of pave a path, I think society will be a lot better for it, as long as they speak well.
100% agree with that. All right, let's move on to lacrosse. Men's lacrosse right now has a record of 1-4, which is pretty surprising, I think, to most Penn State fans. Not a great showing so far this season for a team that's typically one of the stronger teams on campus. And you have to really think about, are they facing an identity crisis without Grant Ament, who left for the professional lacrosse world? At the beginning of the season, you looked at Mac O'Keefe and TJ Malone, who were supposed to be the offensive firepower for this team, and they just really don't seem like they're pulling their weight lately.
Not at all. It's always hard when you lose a player, or not lose a player, but have a player go on to greater aspirations and things. So you feel happy for them, but you have to be worried about what's going on at home. And for them to really come together and figure it out is going to be the challenge so far. And do I think they can do it? Of course. I think any team is capable of really becoming cohesive together.
I agree with that. And moving on to women's lacrosse, they have a record of 3-3 right now. They defeated Michigan 13-12 in overtime in a noon game on Sunday, which ended a 3-game losing streak for this team. Now, if you watch these Nittany Lions play, they're very talented, especially because they have the highest rated freshman class in the country. So, lots of good things coming on the recruiting path for Missy Franklin and this coaching staff. But with that, you also have to keep in mind this is a young team. They have talent, but it's going to take some time for that talent to get acquainted to the Big Ten stage where, like I said before, every team is talented. So if they can get that figured out, get these freshmen more acquainted to the speed of this game, they're going to be unstoppable for seasons to come.
Exactly, like we said with women's basketball, freshmen are coming in, and it's time for them to step up. But at the same time, they're still freshmen, so they need that time to kind of develop and to be allowed to make mistakes here and there. But of course, limiting those mistakes is how you progress as a team.
Definitely. And I think that this team needs to peak at the right time. You don't want to peak midway through the regular season. You want to hit your bumps in the road early in the season so you can say, "Hey, we didn't do this great against this team. Let's improve on this come playoff time." And if you do that, you're going to see some success in the postseason, which for women's lacrosse, I think that they are accepting the defeats early in the season, and that'll give them some time and ways to improve.
The only way is up. Well, you could always go down.
Definitely. All right, let's move on to women's volleyball. Record of 9-5 completed a weekend sweep of Michigan State, extending their win streak to 5.
Annie Kate Fitzpatrick had 8 kills and 1 block this past game. Serena Gray had 7 kills, and Caitlin Horde had 6 kills.
Mm-hmm.
They were doing it.
Yes, it seems like they're really spreading the wealth among all of these talented players on this team, that's really hard to stop. And then you also throw Johnny Parker into that mix, who obviously she's very experienced, where Fitzpatrick is just a freshman coming onto this team. The fact that she's able to contribute right away on this team, that's setting her up great for the future. So if they can keep, developing these offensive weapons, what team is going to be able to defend all of them? The answer is none.
None, clearly. The coaching staff is doing a really great job with these ladies, and I think they're going to be a team to watch.
Definitely, and we already know how good women's volleyball can be in the postseason, evidenced by their plethora of national championships.
Plethora.
That was a great word, wasn't it?
I love plethora.
All right, so moving on, we're going to talk about Penn State wrestling's weekend at the national championship. 4 national champions for Penn State this weekend. We will talk about it next with one of the Collegian's wrestling reporters, so stay tuned.
Get ready for some wrestling. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are here with the Daily Collegian beat reporter, Jake, for wrestling. How you doing, Jake?
Doing well, guys. How are you?
Hanging in there.
That's good.
So, this weekend was the NCAA tournament for wrestling. Can you tell us how the Penn State wrestlers did?
Yeah, sure. So they had 9 guys ultimately qualify for the NCAA tournament. They had 6 guys take home All-America honors, and 4 of those 6 guys won national titles, and Penn State actually went 4 for 4 in national title bouts, which is quite impressive and typically unheard of, except if you're Penn State.
Amazing. So those 4 wrestlers are Roman Bravo Young, Nick Lee, Carter Starachi, and Aaron Brooks. 2 of them in RBY and Aaron Brooks already won Big Ten titles, but Nick Lee and Carter Starachi did not win Big Ten titles. Can you just tell us a little bit how they were able to come back from those losses and wrestle all the way to national titles?
Yeah, sure. So I think a big part of it is familiarity. So, both Nick and Carter wrestled guys in the national finals. They wrestled in the Big Ten finals. And so, Nick said afterwards yesterday, that he doesn't really look back on past matches and doesn't really dwell on past losses. I mean, he said, they're good to learn from, but, he doesn't dwell on them and think, oh, why me, and things like that. So I think, for Nick, it was sort of just treating it as a new match, as if he was facing, maybe Ironman for the first time. And really just, I mean, he talked about staying disciplined, staying within himself, and, really just trying to be the best that he can be, and, like just show that he's learned some lessons from even the Big Ten tournament up to now. And then with Carter Starace, it was the same thing. He took on Iowa's Michael Kemmerer. They faced off in the Big Ten title bout at 174 pounds, and Kemmerer won 7-2. And now this time, Starace won and took Kemmerer into sudden victory, where, he got a last-second takedown. And, the thing, Carter Starace said, even going into the finals, he was confident. He said, I know I'm the best. I know I'm going to win. And he went out and he proved it. And, he talked a lot about how one of his biggest training partners through all this is Thomas Gilman, who wrestles with the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club and is a former Iowa Hawkeye and taught Michael Kemmerer, a lot of his moves currently. And so, having that training partner and having that experience of someone who knows Iowa, definitely helped. And I think also part of it is, Starace's been successful before. And it was sort of all just about game planning and sticking with what got him there, because he was so close, rather than trying to change things up.
Okay, so what should we look out for during the off season with Penn State wrestling?
Yeah, so I mean, I think one, this was a very young team. They had 6 freshmen in the starting lineup this year, which typically doesn't happen. So I think, a lot of these guys are going to get better. I think a lot of these guys are going to try to qualify for the Olympics. The Olympic trials are in like 2 weeks. So, I think that'll be a big focus. I think you might, and I don't want to speculate too much on this front, but you might see some kids either transfer out or transfer in. And I think really just you'll see, I don't know what to expect this offseason, but I think when next season comes around, you will see the benefits of this offseason and having a full offseason with maybe hopefully reduced effects of COVID and things like that, where Penn State will be able to get a full season in and these guys will come back with, another year of experience. And, I think Penn State's definitely showing like, hey, if we can have 4 guys in the national finals and win all 4 and not win the team title, basically, like, you better look out, because if 1 or 2 more wrestlers had maybe become an All-American or just won a couple more matches here or there, it would have maybe given Penn State the team title. So I think it speaks to how good Iowa was this year, but I also think it speaks to the potential that Penn State has.
Definitely going to have to keep an eye on Penn State wrestling in the off season. Jake, thank you so much for joining us this week on Sports Speak. And next, we are going to talk to one of the Daily Collegian's men's basketball reporters about the newly hired head coach. So stay tuned. All right, everyone, welcome back to Sports Speak. We are here with one of the Daily Collegian's men's basketball beat reporters, Justin Morganstein. Justin, how are you?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, thanks for joining. So we're going to just get right into it. Penn State basketball recently hired their new head coach in Micah Shrewsberry, who is currently an assistant coach at Purdue, has both NBA and collegiate experience. Justin, what do you think about this hire for the Penn State program?
Well, Alexis, I think they brought in someone who is really going to bring in a foundation for them. I mean, he's someone at Purdue who was really respected amongst players and coaches and, brought that to the next level as well. He worked with the Celtics for multiple years, had a big role in developing guys like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, some household names, which is pretty exciting. And, at Purdue, at the college level, he was able to do the same thing. And he got the Boilermakers alongside Matt Painter to some pretty good success. I mean, unfortunately, they lost in the NCAA tournament in the first round on Saturday night, but that gives Micah a chance to get to Penn State, which he did today, and start to get adjusted to what life's going to be like at State College. And of course, try to, build a team, build some of that foundation back, considering, what they've lost as of recent.
So, Justin, speaking about Penn State, can you tell us about some of the players who are in the transfer portal?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they had definitely their share of guys enter the portal since, the end of the season and Jim Ferry not being retained. But, one name that sort of sticks out to me right now, someone who could stay, is a Seth Lundy. He came out with a statement to 24/7 Sports, I believe, saying that, he was really just evaluating all of his options at this point, more than saying that he is transferring at the moment. But I think there's a good chance once he sits down with Shrewsberry, gets a plan in place with him. I think there's a good chance that, he evaluates his options at State College as well and could very possibly be here next year. But like I said, that all depends on what he thinks of Shrewsberry and his staff. And that's something we're probably going to find out, pretty soon.
Definitely. And, about the players that are also in the transfer portal, a majority of their starters from last season, what do you think that their mindset is that they want to leave this Penn State program, who seems to be bringing in a reputable coach in Shrewsberry? And what kind of options are they looking at in terms of destinations for next season?
Yeah, I mean, Alexis, there's no doubt that the program has pretty much been torn apart over the last year and a half. I mean, this was a program that was going to potentially be a number 5 seed in the NCAA tournament last year. And now you're looking at it, they've gone through 2 coaches in less than a year and, almost are back at square one. And so, I mean, it wasn't really a surprise that all these guys decided to leave, especially, a Myron Jones or an Isaiah Brockington that have years of eligibility left and could go to, a bunch of high majors that may, suit their talents just as well, if not better than Penn State. So I think, they're going to have to do some real searching, some real soul searching, where they want to go, what their plan is. But there's definitely a chance that, like I said, Seth Lundy, and Isaiah Brockington is back next year, just because of what Shrewsberry can potentially bring here. But there's no doubt they're going to evaluate all their options. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these guys, also like a Seth Lundy, go to some mid-major programs that could really use their contributions.
So, speaking about transfers, let's try to debunk this aspect of the transfer. So, what does the eligibility look like after a player transfers?
Yeah, so over the last year with COVID, I mean, NCAA eligibility has pretty much been everywhere. It's been a mess. But what has gone on for basketball, and what looks to be the trend going into next year, is that because of COVID, you're more likely than not going to be able to be eligible. We saw that with Sam Sessoms, who came in from Binghamton last year. And, you're going to see definitely, I think, more of that as we start to go in towards the future and as COVID continues to affect college sports. But at the same time, Penn State, while they're losing guys, they're going to be looking to bring guys in. Like, this is almost free agency in the NBA at this point. You can talk to guys, you can show them the program, show them what you have to offer. And even like Micah Shrewsberry right now had a 4-star recruit, Jameel Brown, from the Haverford School near Philadelphia, committed to Purdue, ready to go there next year. Now he decommits early this morning. And who knows, maybe he wants to follow Micah Shrewsberry there and he can start to build, a new core, which is really interesting. I mean, it's something that college sports hasn't really seen in its history. And it's going to be very interesting to see how it gets handled with guys leaving Penn State and guys who want to come into Penn State. So that should be interesting.
We'll definitely have to keep an eye on that recruit and see how many other guys Shrewsberry gets to transfer into this program. But I want to talk about players who were on Penn State's team last year, but haven't entered the transfer portal. And 2 of those notable names are Miles Dredd and Sam Sessoms, 2 pretty big contributors to this last season for Penn State. So what do you think their mindsets are with how many players have entered the transfer portal, and what does the outlook look like for this roster next season?
Mm-hmm. I mean, they were a pretty tight-knit group this year, so I'm sure that they informed each other of all their plans and all that stuff ahead of time. But for Sam and for Miles, these are 2 guys that I think, regardless of who's on the team next year, can provide things of need. Like Miles Dredd, you can never get enough wing scoring and wing defense, which is something that he provided tremendously off the bench for most of the year, and then replacing Seth Lundy towards the end of the year. And for a guy like Sam, who at the beginning of the year looked like he could be a potential 6th man of the year candidate in the Big Ten. He gets a chance now, probably in the starting lineup, to, be the point guard, be the facilitator, and be someone who, more like where he was at Bimington, having a chance to score the ball, which is, what he does best, essentially. And we saw a little bit of that this year, but depending on what the roster outlook looks like next year, he's going to get a lot of opportunity. And for those two guys to, reevaluate their options and transfer when they know they have a guy in Shrewsberry coming in now, maybe it just didn't make sense for them. So I can see it from both perspectives, with transferring, without, and not transferring. But for those two guys specifically, I think that, maybe that was a decision that they thought was best for them and their basketball talent.
Well, everyone, thank you for coming to another basketball session of Sports Speak with the Daily Collegian reporter, Justin. And stick around. We're getting ready to wrap it up.
So it was an interesting week for both the wrestling and men's basketball teams. Wrestling national championships, where, like we said before, 4 national champions for Penn State, and men's basketball getting a new coach in Micah Shrewsberry. So definitely going to have to keep our eyes on both teams as they now enter their off seasons. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Sports Speak. I'm Alexis Yoder. Alongside me is
Jared Smith. Happy springtime.